Okay, so for those of you who are just joining us, I just want to go through our housekeeping stuff one more quick time. If we could put that slide up really quickly. If not, I think I have it memorized. First of all, we have closed captions going at the bottom of the screen. You can check on those, click on those. Oh wow, there's some cool music in the background now. That's awesome. So change your name tag over to your first name, your pronouns, and your project location. There is closed captioning available. All the session presentations are going to be being recorded and will be posted online early next week. In this next session, there's going to be a lot more interaction between you all. There'll be breakout rooms, so make sure you're listening deeply and making no assumptions about any of the other, making no assumptions about anything that's happening or people are saying or where people might be from. Everyone's coming to this work with a different perspective. Remember to connect with each other using the chat. Everybody's doing an awesome job with the chat. It's really great and lively. Thank you so much for participating in that way. And then the other piece is feel free to connect with some of the resource team members directly that are in the room. And if you haven't already, register with Eventbrite. I just want to say a few words before we head into the session with Tasha and Scott about our resource team. The resource team is a collection of wonderful creative placemaking practitioners that are available to all of you, our town grantees, as coaches, as mentors, as advisors. We have on our website a full list of the bios of all the folks who are currently resource team members. And you can go to that list and check it out. If anyone there looks like they might be helpful to your project, you can put in a request right online there to us, and we'll make a connection. Some of the way the resource team members have participated with our town grantees this year are that we've got one resource team member who's doing some one-on-one coaching with artists in a project on a regular basis. We've had some city employees use some of our resource team members as mentors and coaches. You can use them all along your project, or if you have one question or some sticky thing that you're working through, they're available for that. So please, if you haven't already, take advantage of that resource. And then for the new Our Town grantees for the 2021 cohort, we will be setting up consultation meetings, one-on-one consultation meetings with you in January. You can go ahead and request one of those now in that same consultation form. I'll speak with you, or Margie Waller will speak with you and kind of dig into your project, learn more about it, and then try to connect you with some folks who'd be helpful. But without further ado, we're really excited about this session today, led by Scott Oshima and Tasha Golden. So take it away, Tasha and Scott.
Hello, you all. So good to be here. Can you hear me okay?
Oh yes, I can hear you.
Hello. We're so glad to be with you all. My name is Tasha Golden. Who am I? Where am I? What should I tell you? Okay. Well, right now, I spend most of my time. I direct research for the International Arts and Mind Lab in the Center for Applied Neuroaesthetics at Johns Hopkins University. But my main career before this was I was a singer-songwriter for a lot of years full time. And I also founded a program called Project Uncaged. That's a creative writing based program for girls that are involved in the US juvenile justice system. And I'm so glad to talk with you all today about community engaged programs. And Scott, who are you?
Who am I? Hi, I'm Scott Oshima. I use they, them, theirs pronouns. And I'm here in Los Angeles on Tongva and Chumash land. I work at the Japanese American Cultural and Community Center as the Director of Community Arts, and a large part of my work centers around a community initiative that I'll share about in a moment called Sustainable Little Tokyo. And I'm also an artist, photographer, performance artist, writer, and yeah, I have deep roots here in Los Angeles as a fourth generation Chinese Japanese American here in LA. So yeah, very excited to share and a little bit about our community engagement and apply some of the LISC toolkit, kind of looking at through the lens of our community work. So I'll kick it back to Tasha, and thanks so much.
Awesome. Well, we are going to go ahead and get started. I'll share my screen to make sure that oh no, it says host disabled participant screen sharing. Can somebody help me out? Give me my powers.
You should be able to now. Go ahead.
Awesome. So exciting. Okay. I'm going to click present here. So I put this in the chat for you, but if you could drop in the chat, if you all have core values for your program or your initiative, and you want to just tell us one of them, drop it in the chat. It's really cool to share them to see where you all are at with your core values. But also sometimes when other people share theirs, like we get great ideas for like, oh, I want to adopt that for my program. So this is just a great chance to collaborate and share some of those. If you don't have any core values like articulated yet, no problem. We might help you out with that later on in this session. So never fear, but do add this to the chat if you would like to. So to start, this is from the LISC toolkit, and apologies for the pixelation. I just grabbed it from their fabulous website. So if you want a greater version of it, you can go to the LISC toolkit website. But we wanted to begin with this spectrum that's been kind of a visual for you to kind of see that you can identify where you are on a spectrum. The value of this to somebody like me is that it reminds us that there is we can actually pinpoint or map where we are, that it's not just, we're not just out here in the ether doing things. We can say like, what level am I at on this? Am I at a level where I'm just informing people in my community about something that I want them to know about? Am I at a level where I'm inviting their feedback into something? Am I at a level where I'm actually actively involving them in my programming? Am I collaborating with them in a leadership way? Am I having them take charge of a lot of things? This model uses the word empower. I typically avoid that word. It's kind of a controversial term in this sort of work. So I just wanted to share that too, in case you aren't aware of that. But choose, if you're going to use it, but use it with awareness of how it's often interpreted. The ideas of sharing power or giving somebody power can be kind of complicated, but that idea that residents can make decisions about what they want to have in their community and to what extent are they involved in that process is incredibly important to consider. So as you're looking at this spectrum, I would love for you all to just be thinking about, okay, my program, first of all, I should say that you are probably often at various points on the spectrum. It's not like you just live on one and that's just what you always do. But there's probably one point on the spectrum that you spend more time at than the other ones. So what for you, what might that be? And file that away, because in your breakout groups, you'll be sharing a little bit about how you see yourself at one portion of this spectrum or another. And the value of this again is that we can map ourselves. And then that's also a reminder that you can move around, that wherever you are on the spectrum is not fate. It's not where you're stuck, but you can hopefully begin to imagine what it might mean to move to a different part of the spectrum, what that might look like for you. And part of our job today is to help you envision what that might mean for you to move on this spectrum. So I often think about this work using this model. And because this learning lab is looking at equity, imagination, and systems change, I often talk about the social ecological model of health, which is this concentric circle model that you're seeing here. And my field is public health. And so we are often talking about population level change. And in the field of public health, if you're not familiar, a lot of the work around health, you probably know this for sure, for many decades has been individual. Like if we notice that people have high blood pressure, then we're trying to change individual behaviors to change individual levels of blood pressure, right? Or if we notice that people are lacking nutrients, we're like trying to get to them to change their diet versus asking questions about what's going on with a system or structure that's causing there to be maybe less access to quality foods, for example. And there's been a transition in the field of public health for the last few decades to really move toward, that's an individual biomedical model, and we want to move to this social ecological model, which is recognizing that, of course, we have our individual behaviors, our individual genetics, biologies, etc. But we are always within a context. All of us is contextualized with our geographies, our space, our relationships, our communities, etc. So this model of health recognizes that our health is affected by interpersonal relationships, by our communities, the organizations and institutions that we have access to or that have access to us, that might be oppressing us, for example. We're influenced by our policies and by our culture. And I should say that, the concentric circles here are not fixed. All of these things interact with one another. So don't be don't be fooled by the setup of this visual. It's just to be helpful and help you get a visual. But again, I will ask you, in the work that you are most often doing with your program, again, recognizing that you're probably functioning at multiple levels of this model, is there one where you feel like you are most often functioning there? Is your program designed to address individuals, to address relationships, to address organizations, institutions, community factors? Is it meant to address policies at whatever level? Is it meant to address sociocultural norms, realities, et cetera, structures, systems? So just to file that away, what is it that you're seeking to address most prominently right now, your program, as you've been envisioning it so far? Obviously, effecting change at this level, at levels outside of the individual, is difficult and it's hard work. And that's why it's been so easy to just live here. Let's just get individuals to make better choices and practice self-care, and then we'll never have to do anything out here, right? So it takes work and it takes imagination, which is why I get excited about this confluence of art and public health, because the artists are the people who can imagine the world being different than it is and to help effect change. James Baldwin said that we made the world we're living in and we have to make it over. And I love this because as a reminder that that the world as it is, the systems and structures that we experience, the narratives that we experience, this world was not inevitable. It was not inherent to our history, that it was purposefully created in many cases, and it was made. We made this world, whoever that we is, we could talk about that all day, but we made this world. And we have to make it over. It's a creation, and that means that we can recreate it. But it takes a lot of bravery, and it takes artists. Artists are the ones who can imagine the way the world could be. So when I'm working with artists, I adapt this social ecological model here on the left to this model of artist practice on the right, ways to imagine community engagement. Obviously, these are not one-to-one, they just look kind of like they are, but just like on the social ecological model, how the concentric circles are not fixed, these also interact. There's not, these political and sociocultural change is not always outside of awareness and education, et cetera. But this is a way to start imagining, is your program primarily looking at direct health benefits, at data? I'll talk about that in a second if you're like, what the heck is that? Awareness and education, political and sociocultural change. So let's just drill down on some of those a little bit. Direct health benefits. When I tell people that I research and do work at intersections of art and health, this is usually what they are imagining. They're thinking about individual and group well-being. They're thinking about arts programs that are designed to maybe reduce stress or to increase mobility, to get people more active, to help people connect socially, all kinds of things that we imagine. People often think of art therapies, music therapies, et cetera. But oftentimes we're designing programs that are right around these direct health benefits, and it's incredibly important. And we need people to be thinking at this realm, but often it's just a place to begin. And so I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. Improved data and communications. This is getting at what, how does art affect what we know about ourselves, about our contexts, and about each other? A big component of my work has been recognizing that art helps us to talk about things that we otherwise don't talk about. It helps us share things that we otherwise don't share. Art's a big role that art has played throughout human history, especially, documented history, is helping make things what I call talk aboutable. We share things and we broach topics that we won't broach outside of film, TV shows, poetry, novels, music, plays. These are places where we can broach sensitive or stigmatized topics more freely, and we can engage with things that we otherwise can't tolerate. So we will hear things. We are open to hearing things that we otherwise might not be open to hearing, and we are able to share things that we otherwise might not be able to share. And what does this mean? It means that there are things that we might not be able to know, like literally epistemologically, there are things that we might not be able to know outside of the arts, including about ourselves. But this also in my work has implications for health and healthcare. What are physicians not able to know about their patients because they ask questions in really particular limited ways, and they accept answers in really particular limited ways? And in my work, of course, we found that we learn very different things from girls in the juvenile justice system from their poems and songs than we have ever learned in questionnaires or interviews or focus groups, right? And I'm sure that you all have could imagine similar things in your worlds. What are people sharing in your arts programs that you imagine? And we just heard about the storytelling that can happen in like quilting groups and church potlucks, right? What are people sharing in those contexts that they're not sharing otherwise? And what does that mean for what we know as a society, as healthcare practitioners, as people trying to organize and mobilize communities? That's important it's a form of data. Obviously, arts can function for awareness and education. It increases access to information. It can improve understanding and cultural relevance of information. It can increase memorability and shareability of information. And arts creates really intuitive opportunities for press coverage. Like when you have an arts-based opportunity to share health information, you're much more likely for that arts event to get covered by the local media because it's art than if you just had some scientist being like, hey, here's a thing you could be doing for your health, right? It's just not as interesting. I mean, there are scientists who are interesting, but art helps. And then the last level here at the outer circle is stimulating and sustaining collective action. Artists have been at the forefront of social movements forever, right? There's a way that we can stimulate people, spark interest, help people feel a sense of belonging to something that's larger than themselves. And artists are often the ones who are organizing, mobilizing, re-narrating experiences, re-narrating communities, etc., and helping persuading politicians, persuading voters, whatever the case might be. Again, all of these levels interact, and a lot of arts programs are functioning at more than one of these. What I have found is that oftentimes arts programs are functioning at one or two of these and could relatively easily add a third or fourth one without actually changing their program very much. It's just a matter of, it's less a matter of, say, budget or resources than sometimes just a matter of imagination, which is part of what we're going to spend our time on in breakout groups today. So as an example, I mentioned that I founded a program called Project Uncage, which was designed, it's a creative writing-based program that was designed to reduce stress for girls that are incarcerated while also providing some coping skills. And it was inspired by a program that I had worked with where they did some creative writing with young people who were locked up and then made books of their poems. But I noticed that those books were only ever given back to the participants and maybe to like the funders of that program, and nobody else got them. And when I first read those books, I was like, wait a minute, this is some important information and these important stories and narratives and experiences that are in these books. I can think of a dozen people who need to see these books like right now. So I kind of created this program with the idea that yes, we will provide these direct health benefits, that smallest circle in the concentric thing, but we will also publish books of their poems. And when we publish these books of poems, we send them along with policy briefs and advisory briefs to people like the mayor's office, city council members, judges, probation officers, state juvenile justice secretaries. And so it's basically like, here's what girls have to say about their lives. Here's something that you could do about it. We're going to pair these together. And hopefully these girls' voices can have an influence on the decisions that you make about resources, justice related decisions, etc. And because, like I mentioned, because this is an art form, people are interested in chatting about it, and it creates opportunities that wouldn't exist otherwise. So for example, when we launched this book called One Day I'll Rise, the people who wrote in this book can't be at a public book launch because they're either locked up, or if they're no longer locked up, appearing at a performance like this would disclose their justice record, which they should probably not do if they're minors, or they shouldn't be required to, for sure. They're not required to. So in order to protect them, we wanted to still launch give them a voice and give them a huge platform for the launch of this book. So we invited some, I wonder if this is, there it is. Some of these really well-known artists in our area, Ben Solia, a national artist, Hannah Drake, a spoken word artist, I hope you know her work, Daniel Martin Moore, and Ja'Cory Arthur, who's a really well-known music artist and is now a local council member as well. And they performed the girls' poems, set them to music, etc. We also had state representatives and some other people there reading poems from the book. And that meant that our local magazine was interested in writing this up because that's interesting news, right? It's not just girls are locked up, here's some statistics about them. They had a story to tell. And because that was a sold out event, then this reporter from the Courier Journal found out about it, came and shadowed me for a few months and wrote this feature story that became a Sunday story in the Courier Journal in Louisville, Kentucky, and was picked up by the AP. So went around the country with quotes from girls' poems and etc. I can't tell if what you all can see here. So this is just a way to show that we did direct health benefits, reducing stress, providing coping skills. We were also able to get a lot of data from girls from their poems and the songs that they shared, because it reveals a lot about their lives and the things that we need to change. We were able to have a lot of community impact because we'd have these events that centered on the arts. And we were able to help the girls influence policy by combining their work with policy briefs and sending it to the appropriate people. And we were able to do this without really changing the core functions of the program. Like, it's still a creative writing based program. It was just imagining where else could this work go once they've written. And it's either going to stay within the walls of the program, or it can do a lot of different things. And the budget for this doesn't change that initial budget very much at all. So this is part of what we want to help get you all thinking about. And Scott will have some more about that too. So as a quick mention, at the beginning, I asked about your core values. And I wanted to share that a lot of the work that we've done with Project Uncaged is based on this idea of combining arts and public health, but it's also based on our core values. And I wanted to share some of the core values for Project Uncaged, because in order to live up to our core values, we have to do these things that level up our community engagement. And I wanted to share that with you all as an opportunity, rather than saying like, okay, here's my program, here's my core values. Now I have to add on this leveling up kind of stuff. What if your core values required you to level up in order to just adhere to the things that you've decided are meaningful and important to you as a program? And so, for example, here's our core values. We believe girls are the experts in their own lived experience always. We're committed to helping girls articulate, amplify, and address issues affecting their lives. Social change shouldn't be pursued for or about girls, it must be pursued with them. We therefore emphasize participants' own capacities to know, lead, and create. Art is an important means of expression, healing, and influence. We interrogate adultism, paternalism, privilege, pity, and power. We cultivate spaces in which it's safe to know what you know and feel what you feel. That's a Bessel van der Kolk statement about what trauma is when you can't know what you know and feel what you feel. And the last one, girls have much to teach and we have much to learn. And again, that's just showing that, we had to do those extra levels of this program in order to be able to adhere to these values. If we weren't doing that, we would be missing at least 4 of these 8 values that we articulated. So just to inspire you to consider
Core values thing is great for us, Sherry.
Yeah. Okay. So I am going to stop screen sharing and pass this over to the fabulous Scott.
Hi, everyone. Thank you. So sort of to share, what both this, leveling up looks like, as well as the different kinds of community engagement that we do in Little Tokyo. I thought I would share a little bit about our work, giving a kind of quick, broad overview about Sustainable Little Tokyo and about, sort of how we created our community vision and use our community art projects as a way to continue to refine and update that vision. So just a very, very quick, intro for folks who don't know Sustainable Little Tokyo. It's actually a nonprofit throuple that includes my organization, which is obviously a 50-year-old arts and cultural organization sharing Japanese and Japanese American arts, and contemporary and traditional, and has our deep roots in community organizing. Little Tokyo Community Council, which is itself a nonprofit coalition that advocates for the neighborhood in a unified voice. They're 22 years old. And Little Tokyo Service Center, which is a community developer and social service provider. So sort of already the powers of this cross-sector partnership, we're very intentional in working with an existing coalition for community engagement, working with a community developer that has development and planning experience, as well as close relationships through their social workers to low-income residents in the neighborhood. And then, of course, arts and culture, which is primarily my role within this coalition. So it's a group of organizations and people who love Little Tokyo who came together to imagine a future for Little Tokyo that maintains our roots as a historic Japantown, but also a historic community of color that has always intersected with many, many communities of color. And so just to share, I thought we could kind of take a look at from the LISC toolkit about types of community engagement and sort of steps, but then look and see sort of how this actually manifests in real life, as we have been doing this work for decades. But of course, obviously all of this is available online, but we kind of are lucky in that this community really understands that we have a broad range of stakeholders. And so in order to reach folks, we have to use a diverse range of engagements, and that applies to everything from what time the meetings are they accessible for working families or small business owners, how can we reach monolingual Japanese and Korean speaking seniors in our neighborhood? How do we reach the youth? And so obviously we have to use a variety of types of engagement with a focus on, obviously, let's get creative and artistic in our engagement. So it's not just like, come to a meeting and tell us about, wow, like even I don't want to go to those meetings anymore. That instead it could be, come in and do this activity, come learn calligraphy and use that as a way to express what you care about, what you're worried about in the neighborhood. And then, of course, looking at some steps, this is again an example from the LISC toolkit about how you actually, gather input and then transform and collaborate with community in order to actually use that to make social and political change. And so I'll sort of run through the example of one of our projects that was used as a creative form of engaging the community, collaborating with the community, and sort of unearthing what our neighborhood really values and cares about. And just to share, oh yeah, I'm doing virtual background, so I'm a little like, woo! So just to point back, Sustainable Little Tokyo, the long-term advocacy and vision is for equitable development controlled by the community and for the community on 3 pieces of public land and the 3 last pieces of public land in Little Tokyo. And so it's about figuring out what kinds of spaces, what kinds of programs, open space, affordable housing, arts and cultural space, the community feels like will really sustain our Little Tokyo. And so one of the projects that we did when I first came on board was called Takachizu. Ooh. And it's a fake word that is borrowed from takara, which means treasure, and chizu, which means map. And what it was a series of community show and tell gatherings where folks could, bring things, anything, photos, receipts, posters, ephemera, random things that they had memories about, and that they could share those memories. And so it was a space. We actually had a Takachizu community space where folks could come at any time, but we also had organized a series of these show and tells, so that we could kind of gather community groups that are often left out of community planning processes, like, seniors, like, the urban gardeners who grow things on their balconies, or the longtime Japanese American gardeners in our community. And that this was a way to build off of what already exists in the community. And so in that kind of funny, list of the steps, this was, surfacing what we built partnerships, we talked to existing groups, and kind of just got a feel again, of like, who are the folks out there? Who are the groups that have not been a part of these conversations? And that we, actually paid a coordinator to build these partnerships with community groups, so that we were not starting fresh, starting with a blank slate, but saying there are many, many things here, many treasures here that we value and that we need to collaborate with, rather than us determining, we're going to talk to these people and these people. We went to community groups and said, who do we need to talk to? And so that is also a 2, which is, determine what you need to learn. We had to kind of go into this thinking, we don't know everything. And so we actually, have a lot to learn from our own community. And so we did a dozen of these community gatherings that were themed around things that the community came up with, like, like I mentioned, gardening or food. People loved talking about food in Little Tokyo. And that was a way for us in a creative way where people could just feel proud of the things that they care about, of sharing the things that they care about that mean something to them, that we would, gather their treasures. And so we ended up collecting over 150 community treasures, which ranged from, everything from literally people brought food to objects to artworks from legacy businesses that were displaced. And each one of these treasures told a story about what matters in our neighborhood, what we need to fight for in order to sustain our community. And so this was, how we as a community gathered information, right? We gathered stories, we collected and documented treasures as part of a larger effort to update our community vision. And so now, we organized and synthesized all of this information, which, are steps 4 and 5 is organizing, analyzing, and then synthesizing it into what eventually became our Sustainable Little Tokyo 2020 vision. So through all of these things that we learned, all these stories that our community told, that, as I think Tasha explained, talking, doing these kinds of like fun gatherings, making art, sharing art, like it's a way to bring out stories that we would have never heard if we had just had a meeting and said, tell us what you care about, and through all of that, all this gathering, and then various community workshops and conversations, a bunch, community surveys, really, again, using many types of engagement tools, we developed this vision of short-term strategies and priorities that the community identified and said, these are the things that will help us both strengthen the community and eventually, in the longer term, advocate and fight to control development on those 3 pieces of land. And so this vision, also became our guiding document in terms of what kinds of projects the community wanted to see. And so we have used this, and it has a list of, different kinds of like arts and cultural, housing, small business support, things that people wanted to see in our neighborhood, through all of this gathering, and could now, actually achieve these goals and start to tell our story in a different way. And so just like some examples of the projects that we do, we heard a need for more public art to share our history and culture. And so we have an annual temporary window artwork project called Windows of Little Tokyo, where we commission local artists to imagine, the future of our neighborhood. This is Audrey Chan's work in our neighborhood from the first year. We, wanted to, in continuing efforts to build solidarity across communities of color, Fandango Obon, which is really led by Nobuko Miyamoto and Quetzal Flores, is an annual music and dance festival bridging our Mexican, Japanese, African, and Muslim American communities around circle dance. We've had artists take over an unused storefront to show what kinds of arts and cultural spaces they want to see and need in order to support them as artists and support the next generation. We had Shoto for Little Tokyo teaching Japanese calligraphy to seniors in our neighborhood who felt left out, to actually be able to both learn a traditional practice, but also use it to express their voices as residents who are often not heard in these kinds of processes. So a very wide range and a creative way to gather community, to bring folks together, to support the neighborhood, and then in the longer term to update or continue to refine our original vision as we continue to fight for this land. And just to share, we just before the pandemic began, wanted to focus on updating this development vision and launched into what we called the revision. And then of course the pandemic hit. And this was supposed to be our chance to really reach folks who we also, made mistakes, and we didn't reach everyone in this very early 2013 vision. And so this was our chance to say, hey, we are missing a lot of the voice of small business owners. of low-income residents, of our unhoused residents here in Little Tokyo. Let's take this as an opportunity to really make sure this vision embodies what the priorities and values of our neighborhood. And so we actually, it's an ongoing process. We continue to learn, who we need to be collaborating with and engaging with in order to make change, fight against a century of racist residential restrictions and planning, top-down planning, in order to make sure this community is what we want it to be. And so, we started doing Zoom workshops, which are really boring. And we tried to make them as engaging and fun as possible. We incorporated jam boards so that people could draw and identify threats to the neighborhood. Obviously, there's coronavirus, I get, and then the community could interpret what these drawings meant. And these all, continue to inform this update. But we also knew there's a digital divide. We're only reaching the very, very like core group of people who are deeply involved and have access. And so we decided to pause and say, hey, this actually isn't possible during a pandemic, and start planning out future community engagements led by artists, including this, which is, here's our summer intern helping us build a cardboard model of Little Tokyo. And we're going to bring in the seniors and give them a blank box and say, draw or make your dream space in Little Tokyo. What's missing? What would you like to see? And actually start to build out a model of, exactly what they want the neighborhood to look like, to things like sticker books in partnership with small businesses, so that when people get food to go or pick up, they get a sticker pack. And that sticker pack can be a way for people to similarly design what they want to see in the neighborhood. And so all of this work, from engagement, from collecting, and learning from with and learning from community what we care about, we created a vision. From that vision, we created all of these community-driven projects, and these projects helped us to make actual social and cultural change in the community, to build awareness, to strengthen the neighborhood, and to advocate for it, and really, move from, again, those levels from just engagement, which is just, conversations, to actually building up a movement that can fight for change in the neighborhood. And we've had some major, major wins in the community. We now control, through a lot of our organizing, a majority of one of the blocks, and we are in negotiations now over the final 2 parcels. And so all that to say, this is decades and decades of work, but this is just an example of moving from engagement to really, this is community power that's always been there, and how do we tap into that in order to fight for our community. So yeah, thank you so much. I am gonna pass it back, and we'll go into breakout groups to talk about where you are in your work and have some more intimate conversations.
Yeah, thank you so much, Scott. I'm so inspired by your creative take on the presentation situation. I was just saying in the chat, I need to level up my Zoom presentation with virtual backgrounds. So here's what we're doing with the next 20-ish minutes. You are going to have facilitators in your fabulous breakout groups, which will be automatically, chosen for you. But here's what we're going to do for your 3 to 5 people who might be in your group. You're going to go around the room that you're in, and one at a time, you will share what you do, where you think it falls on the social ecological model, where you think it falls in the community engagement spectrum. You'll have about a minute to do this. So think about how you might give a really quick elevator pitch of what your program does and where you think it falls. So a minute is much less time than you think. But then with the remainder of the time per person, you'll have the other people in your group discussing with you and brainstorming how they think you or your program might be able to level up in terms of impact, in terms of engagement. And then you'll have a little bit of time at the very end of your time together as a breakout group to decide what you might share with us in a broader share out time, which we will have after these breakout groups. So I will put these instructions in the chat if they are not already, but I'm going to stop sharing so that we open. Thank you, Thomas, for putting that in the chat. Yeah, so we will break out into breakout groups. If you have questions for Scott or I, feel free to send us a note and we'll help however we can. But facilitators, we'll just need you to keep time for everybody.
Tasha, just jumping in. We decided not to go with facilitators, so they're self-facilitating.
Ah, okay.
Okay, that's why we put the questions in the chat. So the breakouts are self-facilitated and all the questions that you need to answer are in the chat.
Got it. So you'll just have to time yourselves. So however much time we have, about 20 minutes, however many people in your group, divide that by the number of people in your group, and you'll want to give you 1 minute to share what your program is like, and then 4 minutes, whatever, you know, say if you have 5 minutes per person, it'll be 1 minute to share, and then 4 minutes to chat about what that person shared, and see if you can help each other expand on what you're doing. So yeah, thank you all. Thank you, Lynn.
Thanks.
If anyone is still here and not in a breakout space, let us know. We're more than happy to help you out. You should be receiving a prompt and like a blue button that says asking you to join a breakout room now. And the folks who are here, most of you are hosts of this session. We're happy to drop you into one of the breakout rooms if you'd like. If you'd like to do that, we're happy to do that for you. Jazz, would anyone like to be a part of those breakout groups? No worries if not.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back. This is Tasha, and Scott, I believe, is still with us as well. We would love to have a conversation with you about what you just conversed about. So if you want to switch to gallery view with that little view icon in the upper right-hand corner, that would allow us to see everyone who's here and kind of feel a bit more like we're in a big room to have a conversation. Yeah, I would love to hear from your groups if somebody has anything burning top of mind that you want to bring from your breakout group into this main session.
And I can model too our group. Although I just I just realized I didn't write down everyone's names because I popped in and I was like, ah! But my group, hi everyone. Thanks with my group. We had 3 folks sharing about their work at various levels on the spectrum or the frameworks. We actually had one member who is working around actually kind of has the long-term goal around historic preservation, both of sites and how to actually share history and culture on their Apache reservation. So I think is on the level of like actually building, has groups, has elders, have community folks, and is in the process now of kind of working and collaborating to figure out what this work will look like and how this process will go. So we have that level working towards larger, actually sharing and getting this building larger awareness. And then we had 2 folks who had already a little bit farther along in that they've already worked with artists to produce music videos, or and this other project in Philadelphia to create a podcast that's like a radio play of folks sharing stories and also finding connections between them. So for these 2, it's really about, well, we have a lot of these stories and these people, and these stories and things point to larger systemic and communal issues. So how do we now make sure that we level up from there? And they're already on their way and like sharing them, screening the music videos for city council, or trying to get the podcasts out and public. So I think for those groups, it's about how do we translate what we've learned into what are larger systemic or cultural changes now. So yeah, great. These projects are super exciting.
Oh, thank you for getting us started. Anybody else? Is there something that somebody shared with you that opened your eyes about a possibility for your program, or some idea that you had that you offered somebody else?
Oh, most definitely. I think in our group there were a lot of suggestions that really, I like to change the structure of how we put together our public art project. I currently work with the city of Albuquerque, but I also have been doing consulting with the city of Minneapolis and working on some projects that have stemmed from the George Floyd slaying. The biggest problem has been working with entities that have shifted during this time where we've been putting together an outdoor mural on a basketball court, a social justice mural that the community wanted to really reflect who the community was and not necessarily be reflected as just the neighborhood where George Floyd was killed. And so we did a lot of work on it, but over the last year, a lot of the principals on the project have dropped out for various reasons. The Boys and Girls Club, the director became very ill. And so there was really no leadership coming from them to get more youth involved in this project. The Minnesota Timberwolves had a change of management. And so the new management did not want to continue participating in the project. And then one of the city council members was put in a really difficult situation when she came out in favor of defunding the police. Her constituents turned on her. She was at a pride parade. They surrounded her car and demanded changes and for her to capitulate to what they wanted. It was so disturbing to her, she pulled out of the project completely. So what I learned, I think it's best that when I was talking to Megan and Matt, is to put the community process first and trying to establish what the community would like to see and documenting it, whether it's in a book or a video, like Scott said, and then taking it to the principals so they are committed. Whether there's a change in management, there's a change in government, they still know that this is what the community wants and they can stick with the project because they have the examples of what is needed already. And we don't get caught in a bind with people dropping out and this trying to scramble to try to save the project.
These are great insights. Thank you so much, Robin. Anybody else, something that somebody gave you a great idea or insight, or somebody else's project sparked something for you?
Hi. Scott, your project sparked something for me, right? Like right now, I'm trying to create a Facebook event. I want to kind of like have a show and tell. We're at the beginning of our project. We're doing a cultural, well, we're doing an asset mapping and a cultural plan for our small town. And we've got the partners lined up, and now we're starting to talk to the community more and more. And I was just thinking about like having like a show and tell, like people come and bring, you know, a picture of some piece of art or something like that. And just, I mean, I'm here, I have a co-working space, and I was like, I could set up a camera in the community room, I mean, our conference room, set up a camera and just have people come in between the hours of like, you know, like after hours or whatever, come in between the hours of 11 and 2 and bring your object and do a show and tell. So I think we're going to do that right now.
That's so cool. Anyone else? We have just a bit of time for more insights, or of course, if you have questions for Scott or I, or for one another, you're welcome to voice those or drop them in the chat too. But would love to hear other insights or ideas that were sparked during your breakout discussions. Cool. Anybody have a question they want to voice or drop in the chat for us? While we're here, I just want to encourage you, if you're feeling stuck in this process, like whether it's the program development process, program evaluation process, community engagement process, LISC has been really great about setting up ways for you to access resources, ways to access, you know, a technical advisory group. Please take advantage of those things. It's usually when people are being imaginative, when they're kind of like there's a lot of ideas. It's usually when you have a question about which direction to go, it doesn't mean that you failed or you don't know enough or something like that. There's a lot of resources available to people who are trying to do this work. And I also wanted to say, sometimes the leveling up analogy, as if there's a smaller thing and it gets to a bigger thing, it can be a little bit backwards. Not backwards, actually, just deceptive, in the sense that there's always something that there's always the way that we could be thinking about, like, what more could I be doing? What more should I be doing? Sometimes the answer is nothing. There's no, like, nobody, like one of my teachers likes to say, you don't get into heaven any faster if you do more than what you're doing, or like, we're not trying to moralize the process that any of these arts programs are doing. But if you decide that you think that your program could or should be doing more, sometimes that might mean you're at that sociocultural change level, and you're not considering how the things that people are doing for that sociocultural change might be able to provide some direct health benefits, but you just haven't framed the program in a way to take advantage of those health benefits. Do you know what I mean? So there might be some health benefits, direct and individual group level health benefits that could be available to your participants at that, smaller concentric circle, that would just require some imagination or reframing in order to get your outer level structural change work to also provide some of those other benefits. So these ways can interact quite a lot.
Yeah.
Scott, anything you want to add? Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, no, actually just, hearing you, I think there's also, and this is something that happened within Sustainable Little Turkey, was like, wow, we did all this work, we made this vision, we have all these committees running, community's really excited, and I approached some organizers doing similar work in Boyle Heights and East LA here, and to be like, hey, like, would love to get, their experience and advice, like, how do we turn all of this work now into social and political power, and I was like, how do we, what is it, like, campaigns, blah, blah, blah. And Quetzal Flores, also part of, Sustainable Low Turkey, was like, what are you talking about? He was like, you've already done it. Like, he was like, we've built so many, folks who are so invested and care so much about the community and are ready whenever needed for calls to action. We pulled off a campaign soon after that. But he was, he reminded me that actually the hardest work is sometimes just building up the community, building up the movement, building those connections and trust in community. And that's like the thing. So yeah, again, like what, Tasha shared, it's not necessarily like, oh, this thing doesn't really matter and you got to get there. It's about like, oh, there's already power in this, and how do we take that power and make social change? Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Oh, great. Thank you for sharing those resources, Hannah. We have these links for you all if you're interested in some more of this work and community engagement work. Some great resources here. Copy and paste those wherever you can. With our final time together, we wanted to leave a bit of time. We started the conversation asking you to share some of your core values for your program. Thank you so much to those of you who dropped those in the chat. So cool to see those and read them. I shared some of the core values for my program Project Uncaged. Scott shared some of the values from which they've been working with communities. I wanted to make sure that we gave you all a little bit of time, even while we're still on this call, before you go and maybe forget or it gets away from you, just a couple minutes to brainstorm for yourself. Just in a little bit of quiet here, just a couple minutes. Is there a new core value that you want to articulate today that encompasses or reflects a commitment to community engagement or to multiple levels of impact? Is there something you want to write down that gives you that kind of basis of this assets-based, core value-based way of approaching it? Is there a value that you want to add? And I don't mean you have to add it to your official mission statement or something like that. I just mean for you and your work, or your team and your work. Let's just take a couple minutes to see if you can jot something down, a core value that reflects this for you and your work. Please don't let me interrupt you if you're still thinking of core values, but does anybody want to share one, either aloud or in the chat like Scott has done? Oh, these are secret core values. I love them. Oh, thank you, Jamie. Reaching across barriers in rural communities.
Yeah, I copied and pasted. We are updating our community values as part of our revision, community vision update. And a lot of what we started hearing that wasn't ever really explicitly in our original vision was around, yeah, that like a more inclusive way of thinking about community, that anyone who, is looking for a place to belong can feel a sense of connection and home in Little Tokyo, and kind of and naming what that means to us, that we're not just a Japanese American community, but a broader AAPI, and focusing on BIPOC community that are here, and queer and trans. Yeah. So then, with those values, then it then informs how we do community engagement.
Thank you. Anybody else? Something that's coming to mind for you, or something you jotted down? Oh, thank you, Calvin. Work is grounded in shared values, including equity, racial justice, self-determination, and collaboration. Our artistic vision and asset-based approach recognizes the powerful culture that already exists in communities. Yeah, we support liberatory art that is dialogic, participatory, and builds agency. Thank you.
That's not mine. That's from earlier today. It was from the NOCD, New York, earlier.
Oh, right on.
Yeah. I took a screen capture of that because I really liked it.
Yeah, thank you for sharing it here. And Matt, we're dedicated to stretching the community's idea of what is possible. How lovely. Who is making art and culture, how it's valued. It makes sense to commit to also stretch ourselves along the spectrums we see today. That's great. Thank you so much. And Robin, creating emotional equity or inclusive community buy-in in a space people feel a connection. That also refeeds the community, city, and state arts infrastructure, which provides 3.1 billion back to the state of Minnesota. Wow. And Jen, thank you from the New York City presentation, elevating existing cultural practices and community. Oh, thank you all. I know that having these in the chat and having you all share your core values is great for LISC too, to share with grantees both now and in the future, and to consider for how we do this work collectively. I really appreciate hearing from you all. Scott, any last words from you as we close out today?
No, I mean, I think, well, I say no and then I say something. I mean, sort of what I shared in our breakout group, which is, continue to, expect the unexpected and be open to it as you do community engagement, as you do this work. You will learn things, the community will learn things about itself that it could never have imagined, and it will push you in new directions that might require you to, as Tasha said, kind of go back down, level down, or start from scratch again, that we have to be responsive to community, and be open to the things that we don't know. So yeah, really excited and happy to be supporting and available as folks are, on your journeys of leveling up, and doing this work and learning from each other. So I hope folks, you all stay in touch with each other, but also reach out to us if you, have any questions or want to just talk,
Yeah, thank you. It's such great reminders that there's creative risks involved, and obviously we take those with ethics in mind and with our values in mind, as far as what risks are worth taking with whom and who is put at risk, etc. But most of us know, if we are artists, that art involves, sharing something and potentially being rejected, sharing something and having to start over, sharing something and failing the first time. It's abysmal. You thought it was going to be glorious, and it's not. As artists, over time, we learn to take those things in stride. Sometimes we do better sometimes than others, right? But it's also fair to apply some of that same creative strategy to your work as a program, that it's okay to try something, and within our ethics and within, an understanding of who is at risk and who is bearing the brunt of potential failures. With all of that considered carefully, it's okay to see this as a journey and a creative endeavor that we're on, like the other arts that we do. Thank you all so much. I'm going to hand it back over to Lynn, or who takes it from here? Who closes this out?
Teresa is going to close us out.
Lovely, thank you.
Teresa is going to close us out, and Jen's going to finalize the closeout.
Hello again, everyone. What amazing time that we've been able to share together. So much to learn, so much to aspire towards. I want to say thank you. Thank you to Scott, thank you to Tasha, thank you to LISC, to NEA, to all of the speakers and presenters today. But most of all, I want to thank you all as grantees and project team members who came to learn as a collaboration, to share your best practices, and to share the stories of your community and what's most important for you all. So we just want to thank you for your participation today. So I'm actually just going to share or actually move into sort of our closing circle. In the Indigenous way, we did start off with a cultural grounding after we set some intentions. And so, you know, we need to close the circle in the most appropriate way. And so I wanted to share back the intentions and reflections that that I had shared as prompts for reflection and action that can pave the way for equitable change for you all. And for those of you who weren't with us at the beginning of the day, this will be the first time you see this, which is still great. And so I'm going to share my screen. So Design Impact, we published this report around the pathways to the future. We're looking at equity and inequities, how they have been exacerbated during the pandemic, and what opportunities are arising during this time. And so we saw these 6 shifts that emerged based on insights from community members and different stakeholders across multiple sectors. And so we are offering this as a point of intention, reflection, and action for you all. So this morning, when we opened up, we talked about inequity being awakened and this critical consciousness that's happening across the world, and how we can really explore and figure out how we can embody racial justice within our own personal lives as well as our professional work, and how they are really one and the same. How might we understand and dismantle our own entanglements with racist systems? Which is a journey. Again, equity is definitely a spectrum, and so we just appreciate you all leaning into where you're at right now, as well as understanding where the readiness is within your communities. How might we move beyond rhetoric to action? Someone said the other day, anti-racism is the new yoga, and so we don't want it to be sort of a fleeting thing. We want it to be real and actionable. So we're hoping that you're thinking about how you can move towards action and make commitments to that. And how might we work to be actively anti-racist in our engagements with one another, our relationships, and, you know, just in the way that we navigate all of the world systems around us. So I hope that you all were able to pick one of those intentions and lean on that today. So that is what I had shared this morning. But I wanted to actually introduce this final slide for the day as homework for between now and next week, just something that you can meditate on as, you know, something that you can make an intention towards. And even if you're doing it well, like how can we go deeper and deeper? Or how can we adopt sort of a new intention around specifically the rise of rest and healing. And so with the cultural grounding, Lynn opened that up for us earlier today and said how important it is for us to heal and repair. And so as we think about creativity and innovation and imagination, oftentimes, you know, it appears as though we're trying to move forward with something new without recognizing how we got here. And so it's important that we're thinking about the healing, the communal healing and the individual healing that needs to happen, and how we have to repair that harm that has been done simultaneously while we're building new things. So the homework, or some prompts for you all to think about or adopt if you feel any of them might resonate with you or where you're at right now. One of them, or the first, is how might we shift cultural values to embrace rest and reflection as a core part of any sustainable system? Then how might we acknowledge trauma and address its root causes? How might we prioritize healing as we rebuild our communities? How might we reclaim our wholeness in the name of liberation? And how might we deepen our understanding of the connection between the health of our inner selves and the health of our community and country? And so I feel like this all so interconnected, even in the last session that Scott and Tasha presented, as we think about the public health lens and thinking about community health and all of the work that we're doing towards well-being, and how culture and arts can support that in creative placemaking. So that's what I wanted to share with you all. And so I hope that you pick one of these and, you know, just reflect on it for the next week. And then we'll come back again next Wednesday and share more and continue to learn and grow with one another. So I wanted to thank you for this time, and I'll go ahead and pass it on to Jen Hughes, who will do sort of the formal wrap up for us and also share what's next.
Thank you, Teresa. Well, it's impossible to wrap up just all that was shared today. Just want to echo gratitude for all of you for being here, for bringing your open heart and open dialogue and conversation to our extraordinary presenters. I'll be honest, I'm grateful to be in this space and to learn from all of you. I'm also on a journey and just appreciate all that I can personally learn from the work you're doing, but also our agency, what is transpiring on the ground. So thank you deeply. We wanted to just do a quick pulse check for those of you still here. We're going to have a poll that pops up on the screen. We want to hear what really resonated today. So take a moment, if you don't mind clicking on this poll. You can check as many options that apply to each of the 3 questions and then complete all 3 questions and hit submit so we receive that. I'll just pause for a moment. And this is for us to continue on our journey to design programming that's really responsive to what's resonating with all of you. I also just would like to do a big call to invite others to join. I think that those of you who are here to the end, it's clear you're getting something out of it. Invite your partners, invite artists, just bring folks along to future learning labs. Again, you can drop in and out of the sessions that will happen over the next 2 Wednesdays. Maybe we can just pull up the quick slide that is a little preview of what is to come. We're going to follow a similar format of cultural grounding and move into a keynote session around the art of invitation. We have a great grantee spotlight in another week. The City of Lancaster and the incredible work that they've been doing. They are midstream in their project to give you context for where they are in this moment. And we'll have another really interactive workshop around equity and systems change. So I do hope to see you all in another week. Again, open invitation, invite your partners, artists, other folks that are engaging in your project work. And thank you so much for being here. It's been really a rich and wonderful time. So with that, I'll close out this learning lab. Take care all.